Keep pushing that boulder to the top of the hill. Welcome one and all to Suckville.
Extraordinary stories from ordinary humans? Yes, please. This is Live from Suckville, and I'm your host, Silva Florence, a writer, editor, and bike tour leader currently laid up in Suckville with a broken hip. About midway through Italy's first lockdown, I decided to learn how to read tarot cards. And I quickly found out reading online that the death card just is the one that scares the living hell out of everyone. Like when it falls out of the deck onto the table, someone's going to die. But that's not the truth in the tarot, at least the way I interpret it. A death is an ending, and therefore also a new beginning. And I got to thinking about this when I was interviewing Jacob Shannon, who has a lot to say about loss, grief, and those unexpected things that can be born out of great sadness. So if that's you and you're grieving anything, a job, a relationship, a loved one, just know this too shall pass. There's proof in the rest of this episode. All right, hello everybody from Suckville. Today I'm here with Jacob Shannon, who is a personal chef and real estate entrepreneur from Colorado, living in Utah. How are you today, Jacob?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm living the dream here in Suckville. And you, Jacob, you had sent me a message not long after I posted about this idea of my podcast about a significant event in your life, let's say, that affected you a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. At the time, I guess the spirit moved me to reach out because I wanted to talk about my personal experience with loss, and I felt that it kind of suited the topic of your podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, it did. And I got to thank you for that. When people open up to each other, I think something really magical happens.
Yeah. It's been 2 years since everything went down, but I feel like the best way to heal is to express myself and to talk with people like you who are, willing to listen, I guess.
Well, thanks for being available. I guess we should probably tell our listeners what happened.
Yeah. It was February 19th, 2020. Ronnie, my wife, and I were out and we were getting some Thai food, and I got a text out of the blue from my mom's husband, which said she had been admitted to the hospital. And that, was some cause for alarm. Initially, I tried to call and tried to text, but apparently she was too sedated to talk. Maybe a couple hours later, Ronnie was going to go hang out with her best friend, and I think they were going to do some crafts or something like that. And about 5 minutes after she left, I got the call that my mom had died, which was wildly unexpected.
What were you feeling in that moment?
It's really hard to put that into an envelope. I was already, drinking for the evening. I just felt bad. I felt a tidal wave of emotion come over me, and I just wanted to scream and yell and cry. It's not a reaction that I would typically have to any other news. I felt so outside of myself.
I think that's a sensation that a lot of people who have lost somebody really important, especially but not only in a very abrupt way like that, would be able to have empathy for you and to know what you're talking about. And so what do you do with that news? What did you do next?
Yeah, my immediate reaction, I guess, was confusion, if I can put it that way. But like Ronnie and I, we hopped in the car and we started driving towards Colorado. Typically a 6 or so hour drive was made 10 because of the blizzard that we ran into, and we ended up actually,
Of course.
you can't have it easy. Like everything's already going so easy.
When it rains, it pours, or when it
Exactly.
snows, it blizzards.
Something like that. So we ended up getting
Yeah.
a hotel somewhere in Wyoming. I think it was like Cheyenne. So we were, like 2 hours out. And then the next morning we finished the drive to my aunt's house. Then I guess the next step was just to mourn. I mean, we were around a bunch of family. My aunt pulled out picture books and we talked about good times and bad times and, just tried to parse the whole thing.
Sure. Yeah. And what kind of a relationship did you have with your mom?
I had a really good relationship with my mom. The last time I saw her, my mom had sent me a text and she was like, "Oh, I found some Calvin Klein V-necks. Would you be interested in those?" Or something to that effect. Very, very mom like, "Oh, I found some clothes,
Totally.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have these socks. Do you want them?
exactly. And I was like, well, I have V-necks, but I don't have Calvin Klein, which she took to read as I have V-necks, but I don't have Calvin Klein. Last time I saw her, she was out, and we all went out to a local watering hole, and we would just like laughed for hours about that miscommunication because what I meant was, oh, I have V-necks, but I don't have Calvin Klein, and she took it as this like, well, la di da, I guess Calvin Klein is not good enough for Jacob.
World-class man that you are.
I guess.
It's a sweet memory though, right?
It is. And I mean, that being the last time I saw her, I guess I can be grateful for that. It was a very happy and loving moment.
So aside from having a good relationship with your mom, which I think is something that obviously it ended too soon, but it's something that not everybody can say that they've had a great relationship with their mom.
I agree. To some degree, I think that can be a level of communication that is hard to pass on to the next person. Not everybody has the same relationship with their mom. And so when I say, oh, my mom died, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. The propensity to put yourself into that situation and be like, oh, well, if that happened to me, then this is how I would feel is very different than, my specific reaction.
Sure. And when people, when you would express and when you do express like, I lost my mom, what responses do you think are the most, I don't know, are there any responses that have helped you more than others?
I think responses that I have sought out have been more helpful than something that people offer. Because a lot of people have gone through a lot of different types of loss in their life. By no ill will, they want to offer that experience. And I think ultimately I found that frustrating because, like I said, I felt so isolated in my situation that it's like, well, no, you don't understand. I don't want to hear about how you lost your dog a couple of years ago or, something similar. I just really, at the end of the day, I just wanted to have somebody say, oh man, that sucks.
You just want to be heard, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like I said, I mean, I don't blame anybody for trying to reciprocate their experiences, but the biggest help to me has been an old church friend has experienced an extreme amount of loss in her life. And so seeking somebody out like that who didn't offer any advice, but was and has been there for me continually, just to say, yeah, it does suck. Things will get better, but it sucks.
But it sucks for like a long time and it's hard to get through that part, I imagine. It just seems like a long road to nowhere.
Grief is an interesting thing and it hits everybody a little bit differently. For me, and I think it's probably true for anybody who's experienced any sort of loss, but it never fully goes away. I mean, life becomes a little bit more normal and, you do the day to day and I'm happy, like I'm happy with the life that I've built, but there's still just that little thing that is missing.
No, I get what you're saying. I mean, when you grieve the loss of someone or something really important, it's not like it at some point it suddenly never happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be there. And like the rare opportunity like this to actually talk about it and to be completely open really doesn't exist as
Mm.
much in the real world. Not a lot of people want to even hear it.
Well, because I think grief, it's almost like something that sometimes we don't want to look at.
Sure.
It's like, things should always be peachy. Like, and as soon as possible, they should be peachy again.
I'd
And
agree
it's,
with that. Ultimately, I think it boils down to everybody is in a different point of their life. I mean, you might be going through this horrible, tragic thing, but without that same person that I lost in their sphere, then they're going to be more focused on whatever, getting a job or education or, whatever is in front of them at the time.
sure, sure.
Which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either. Like, I think most people have a tendency to be kind of self-centered, but in a positive way, not like egotistical, but just focusing on what's going on in their life and how else are you supposed to live, right?
Yeah, I mean, until you have some experiences maybe that really break you down to your core, you hit the old rock bottom, as they say. It's hard to know what somebody else is going through, too. Would you agree?
Yeah. And I mean, I guess the point that I'm ultimately making is that people, even with experience, maybe just don't want that extra load on their plate.
It's a good point. Yeah, because everybody's going through it.
Yeah, everybody's going through something, right?
Everybody's in Suckville, you know? Do you think that this experience of yours changed you in any profound ways?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I'm more focused on myself without being self-centered, if that's fair to say. I just mean to say that initially, I was in the career of cooking for a long time, and the selfish thing that I did was to pull myself out of that and to try and go into sales or to try and go into real estate.
Well, was that necessarily selfish, though, or was that taking
It's
care of yourself?
I mean, is there a difference between selfishness and self-serving?
Um, well, I think the word selfish gets a bad rap sometimes,
Sure.
in that we have this idea, maybe it's from religion, who knows, that we should put all others above ourselves, or others' needs above our needs, which, in an ideal world we probably would.
Right. I mean,
But
there's the metaphysical idea of putting the oxygen mask on yourself before you attempt to help others, right?
there you go. Exactly. And that's the point, is like you need to take care of yourself before you have the capacity to take care of others, I think.
Yeah. I recently read Will Smith's book, Will. Um, and there was a really interesting point in which they go to couples counseling and they are to list out their top 5 priorities, right? Just in life. And I think it was Jada put like her kids, her husband, herself, and then her job. And then Will Smith put himself, his kids, his wife, his job, or whatever. And I mean, it comes from that same idea. And well, his idea, although I believe misguided, was that, yeah, if I can't take care of myself, then how can I take care of the rest of my priority list?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just about a balance, really, about
Yeah,
finding the balance between not neglecting yourself, but not being like a total asshole either.
right.
When you messaged me on Facebook, and you messaged me like specifically about the loss of your mom, would you call that like your biggest rock bottom?
I don't really equate losing my mom to a rock bottom. I think rock bottom is a little bit more of a personal failure type of thing. And, there's nothing that I did that was involved in me losing my mom. Like,
No,
yeah,
certainly not.
Although rock bottom maybe followed soon after, and that was just due to the pandemic. I mean, I lost her February 19th, 2020, which means that it would be, what, 2 weeks until we would start locking down? And the first thing I did when I locked down was buy a fuckload of vodka.
My alcohol of choice was gin.
I do like gin. But actually, it was really interesting. I mean, just before pandemic and my mom dying and everything like that, I was working as a private chef, and the people that I was working for were like super interested in COVID-19. Like, and of course, these are people with ridiculous amounts of money, so they had stashes of food and water and toilet paper. Apparently, is the gold of pandemic. But
I remember that. We were all over here like watching like the mad dash to the store to get toilet paper, and we were all just like, what is going on over there? Why toilet paper?
yeah, of all things, why toilet paper?
Like the world's about to go to shit and we're worried about wiping our butts?
The funny thing to me is people like buying it like they're going to resell it like some bootleg toilet paper.
I know. Like how do you resell toilet paper? As Kleenex.
Carefully, I guess.
This is totally off the subject, but I might actually leave some of it in because it's hilarious.
We got to keep some levity, you know.
Exactly. I mean, that's probably the key here is like how to move past grief to the point where you can have levity again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's not really a secret ingredient.
No.
I mean, for me, it was having, like, I've got a very, very small family, but they're also very supportive and communicative. Like, I talk to my aunt, my grandma, my sister. I've got a lot of lovely women surrounding me.
Amen. Power to the ladies.
Exactly.
And how did this framework of strong women help you get through this?
Oh, shit, it got me through everything. My mom was a teen mom, and like she was the type of person to say, "Oh, I can't do it." Well, fuck you. You know, I actually am gonna do it.
Like what give me an example of something she did like that.
She came from a really small town. So everybody knew everybody, and then she got known as, you know, the teen mom. But in spite of that, she still managed to get herself a bachelor's degree in agriculture from KSU while raising 2 kids by herself.
Rockstar.
I mean, really.
So, now do you have any sort of like sadness left over when you talk about her and how she was?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's always the sadness that she's gone, but I am super proud of who she was and who she became. You know, it definitely wasn't easy. Um, but yeah, I guess my coping mechanism is trying to convert that sadness into just more pride, and I know for a fact that she wouldn't want me to be, you know, sad. So I do what I can to try and honor that.
I love that. I love that one of your coping mechanisms is turning sadness into pride.
Yeah.
I think it's beautiful.
I mean, you know, there's still sadness under the. You peel back a couple layers, I'm definitely still sad, you know. But
well, I mean, I think that's honorable because in my limited experience here on Earth, I feel like the more that we're able to acknowledge what we're feeling and embrace our feelings instead of pushing them away, like the more well-rounded of humans will be and the more richly we'll have lived our lives.
yeah, I think that's well said. I mean, maybe even being in touch with that, at least for me, is a symptom of growing up around such strong women, you know, is I'm really not afraid to express myself. And I think that's part of why I reached out in the first place, is that I think that there tends to be limited male representation in areas of grief or sadness because it's seen as some kind of weakness.
That's a really good point, Jacob.
I feel like I've been taught otherwise, and maybe, hopefully, me speaking out can help somebody else.
That's the whole point of this project, in fact. And you're actually right. Like, most of the people that have reached out to me for one reason or another have been women.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
No.
I
Well,
would
maybe
love
there
to.
is. I want to hear from more guys. So,
Yeah,
all of you male people, male identified people who are listening and have interesting stories to tell, send them to me.
send them on in.
Jacob and I want to hear them.
Yes, absolutely.
And how long do you think it took you to get to the point where you could, speak this freely and openly about the hard stuff you've been through?
I think even from the outset, that there has always been a piece of me that just wants to talk about it. This is the best way for me to process, is for me to be as loud as I can about it, because, in one sense, it checks me because I know I'm not the only person to ever experience loss, and then on the other hand, it kind of gives me the opportunity to break myself down and be vulnerable. I think it's a very important part of the spirit, is to be as open and honest as you can, primarily with yourself.
I think it's bravery also. It's vulnerability and it's bravery, because I think one can't go without the other. It takes a lot of courage to really say what's going on, I think.
I don't have it perfectly right off the top of my head, but have you heard like the three faces metaphor?
No, I don't think so. Tell me about it.
It's a short proverb or idea, but like the Japanese say that you have three faces. The first face you show to the world, the second face you show to your close friends and your family, and then the first face only you know. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with this idea that, yeah, you have to come off as shiny or perfect or well-rounded when you're outward facing. And then there's the circle of people who know you have flaws and still love you for it, and that. And then there's something that only you can deal with, which, one might even call ego, but it's this inward facing thing that's like, it's the inescapable truth. You can lie to people. You can make your life sound grandiose and amazing to people who have absolutely no idea who you are, but you can't really lie to yourself.
Well, if you try and tell yourself I'm fine when you're not fine, like, what good does that do to anyone, really?
That's a perpetration I think everyone is guilty of.
Yeah.
Everybody, I think, has said, I'm fine, when they're just not feeling fine.
Well, and there's one side, which is like fake it till you make it, right?
Right.
And that does work sometimes and can be useful. But
Yeah.
there's also another point in which we just need to deal with what really exists.
I don't mean to flip this on you, but are there any experiences that you have that maybe have been useful for you to fabricate some sort of truth?
Oh, yeah. The interviewee flips it on the interviewer. I love it. I feel like when I got divorced years ago in Colorado, like, that was something I always thought would last forever, And at some point I had to admit to myself that it was really not going to last forever and that I was going to be just fine.
Yeah. And would you say you came out on the other end of it for the better?
Absolutely.
Where you are now versus where you were then?
Now I live in Italy.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
So hell yeah.
When are you going to have Ronnie and I over? Come on.
Anytime you want, buddy. Anytime you want. Come on over. No, I would say that we both are better in the end for having split up. But there was a lot of years that I told myself everything was fine when it wasn't.
Right.
And, obviously I didn't break it off when I needed to break it off because there were still things I wasn't ready, you know?
Right. I guess the reason I ask is to a point then that that lie that you told yourself was ultimately working against who you are now, you know?
Yeah,
Like
in a
you
way.
you needed to accept that truth before you were able to move on and grow.
Yes, certainly. Certainly. And I think maybe I even hadn't grown to the point where I could accept it yet. Like maybe my growth
Awesome. Yeah.
needed to catch up with my acceptance also.
That's
Like,
that's that's a good nugget of wisdom right there.
yeah, if we're able to convert this experience that was really hard and painful into something constructive, and I don't want to say positive because it's not like it's totally positive, but helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's any need to walk on eggshells around the idea of positivity coming from negativity. Like, obviously, this one thing happened and it was bad or unfavorable, but I think it's okay to say that there are good things that manifested from it.
That's a really good point. And I didn't even know that I was doing that, but you're right. Like that's what we kind of shy away from, right? Is thinking that something good could come out of something really bad, like losing your mom unexpectedly.
Yeah, good things can come from bad things, and in some way, maybe that's just like a coping mechanism that I'm employing to somehow justify what happened. But I also think there's a core of truth to it.
I think there's definitely a core of truth to it. I mean, and a lot of the things that we don't manage to integrate or to fully experience, it's because we put a limit on it. We say, this is a bad thing. Nothing good can come from this.
Right.
Or I'll never be able to, overcome this experience. Like, this is always going to suck. We use a lot of words like always and never.
Yeah, absolutes. I mean, I don't know how much benefit comes from speaking in absolutes because nothing is absolute, right?
Right? But we don't really realize it because it's like until you start to become conscious of the way that you talk to yourself about your experiences, you're kind of perpetuating maybe the same patterns that don't help you grow.
I think, grief or loss or whatever is just it can be a big wall to climb, but I think it's necessary, and maybe some people realize that necessity sooner than later or deal with it in a different way. I mean, maybe not everyone sees it as the same sort of barrier that I saw it as, um, but I definitely saw it as something to get past, even though, as I've mentioned before, it's not something you really get past. It's something that you always have with you. But it, for me, was important to delineate myself from sad Jacob to productive Jacob. And it didn't take long before I decided that, like, well, that's not what I want. Certainly not what my mom would want. You know, gotta shake myself awake in some way or another. And
Start climbing that wall, right?
exactly, I figured the best way that I could go about making her proud, at least in my mind and heart, would be to go out and do it. Pull my head out of my ass and, like, get back to it, you know?
And what did like pulling your head out of your ass and getting back to it mean in your case?
Well, for me, it meant quitting working in kitchens, something that I had done for well over a decade. It was pull the rug out and go into a free fall and somehow, some way, make it out the other side. I I won't pretend that I wasn't lucky in some ways, and of course I hesitate to say that because of the horrors of the pandemic, but just with the timing of everything, I was given, I guess, by the universe a period to grieve. You know, I was given at least a couple weeks where literally nobody was doing anything and nobody expected me to be doing anything. Yeah, I mean, whatever you want to call it, luck, serendipity,
Yeah.
God, whatever you believe in. I think things somehow worked out, even if it was, even if we're in the darkest timeline.
If there was something that you could, offer to maybe somebody that is at the start of this process, stumbling around in the dark looking for the light, like, is there any sort of a tool or advice that you could give them?
In my case, it would be like big life events or accomplishments that I feel the most pain, ironically, because I can't share them.
Hmm. Yeah.
You know, like that would typically be number one call would be, "Hey mom, like guess what I just did?" or "Guess you just got a promotion," or you know, I think the only piece of advice that I would really give is that it's not always going to be like this. You know, at the early stages of grief, it feels like it's never ever going to get better. And it does. It does get better. You will get to the point where things feel at least mostly normalish.
Just one step at a time, right?
Absolutely. Life's not like a movie, you know, something's not going to pop up and everything's going to flip around. It's active. I mean, I guess that would be the other piece of advice too is like don't neglect yourself because you're upset. Like go talk to a therapist or a friend.
I love that you said therapy because I think therapy has gotten a bad rap for a long time. It's getting less badly wrapped now, but
Yeah. Well, and for anybody out there listening, I should also point out that therapists are not one size fits all. You might not have a therapist that you jive with, and it's okay to find a different one. They're not all like that.
amen. Yeah. I mean, you've got to find a good rapport with them just like any other human, I suppose. So, you messaged me about the ball in the box and said that it had helped you out. And so maybe that's also something that someone coping with loss could turn to. And what is it in a few words, this ball in the box?
Um, the idea is that grief is like a ball in a box, and inside of the box, there's a button. And that button is what emits all of the, I don't know, the ugly crying, the real deep, deep grief where you really just are gonna burst.
Sound like
You
a
know,
wild animal
you.
being stabbed by a harpoon, kind of.
There we go. So the idea is that as time goes on, that button never disappears, but the ball does get smaller. But the ball is constantly bouncing around this box, and you don't really get to choose when it hits that button. Obviously, when the ball is bigger, it's going to hit that button more often, you know. But as the ball gets smaller, it still exists within us. But as the ball bounces around, there's less likely a chance that it's going to hit that button that causes that deep down grief. I guess that would be the most important point out of the entire metaphor is grief is not ever going to leave you. You know, there and it shouldn't. I don't think even if there was some magical cure that I could go to the doctor and take a pill or get a shot for grief, I think that would make me less of a human and I would have less of the human experience. You
Amen.
know, it's it's fully a part of me and I have to accept that whether I like it or not, you
I
know.
think that is like the most beautiful thing that I've ever heard said about grief. We could almost leave it there, but before the show, Jacob, you asked me if you could plug a little something important.
If I can, I would love to plug Hope House, which is a charity in Colorado that helps teen moms. This was a cause that was near and dear to my mom's heart, and at her funeral, her partners and her family and everybody, we all donated to them. Hope House provides educational programs, supportive services, health and wellness programs, including financial literacy and certified counseling. Uh, Hope House relies entirely on like local businesses, partnerships, volunteering, and donations from people like you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, it's something that is near and dear to your mom's heart. So if anybody listening feels the need to donate to a good cause.
Yeah, if you're a teen mom in Colorado who needs help or know somebody who is, visit the Hope House website at hopehousenortherncolorado.org. That's hopehousenorthernco.org.
So, Hope House, donate. Well, Jacob, I never thought I'd say it, but thanks. It's been a pleasure talking about grief with you.
All right, bye.
Ciao, Jacob. Thank you. Please do send me your stories or comments for a future show at livefromsuckville@gmail.com. Want to be the mayor of Suckville for the week and get to shout someone out or share some advice? Find out more on Live from Suckville's Facebook and Instagram pages. Special thanks to the talented Chris Kirby for my amazing theme music. This episode was recorded in my kitchen and produced by yours truly. Until next time.